A little bit to get through today in terms of discussing Cohen, in particular Cohen's objections to Nozick, and we looked a little bit at that last time, but today I'd like to look at the alternative that Cohen is putting forward. Before we do that, because that won't take the whole class, let's just go quickly through these answers today, just to see, use as an exercise. So the first question, what was your, anyone want to share their answer? He wants to replace self-ownership with something else. What is it that Cohen thinks is more important? Something very close to self-ownership, but it's not quite that. It's not something we can think of in ownership terms. Yeah, Jay.
Did he believe in the self of the ownership of one's physical being, but he's more like a socialist kind of aspect. Things went to people who needed them.
Yeah, sure. He wants ultimately a society in which people get served on the basis of their need more than the basis of the ability to pay. But he has a central value in terms of the rights over your body, over yourself. He has an alternative that he proposes to ownership. Buddy? Yeah, the obligation has something to do with it, but the obligations are owed to people in virtue of something. Clear? Yeah, exactly. Right there. So he talks about autonomy as the thing that replaces self-ownership, or the thing that self-ownership captures, but not quite right. So can you think me? What do you think? What does that mean, autonomy? What is it? He said autonomy. What are we talking about? Yeah, so you control yourself and other people don't control you? Right. And so that gets you a lot of the stuff that Nozick is objecting to, right? So slavery obviously is done wrong because it violates the autonomy of the slave. He's literally controlled by the owner, right? Assault is wrong because the person who's assaulted doesn't get to exercise control over themselves, but that part, at that point, is literally under the control of a person. We'll look at in a moment how Cohen thinks that this gets rid of the taxation worries, right? Because Nozick would say, yeah, but the same I can tell about tax, right? This is what when the tax is being levied on me, that is the government controlling what I do with my work, what I pay for. And so that's a violation of autonomy as well. And Cohen thinks, no, that's not quite right. But we'll get here. Jordan, you had your hand up a second ago? Right, yeah, sure. That's about it. Yeah. So Cohen tries to make that plausible, right? That the idea that's doing all the work here is autonomy and not self-ownership. So there's the idea is you can have two foundational ideas. One is the idea is you have autonomy, and that's what matters about your rights over yourself. And the other idea is, no, it's an ownership claim, so that you have the title or the claim over yourself. And he says, cannot be the ownership claim because, and then he has this artificial eye lottery example. Does anyone remember how that example works? It's a fanciful example. Joe?
There's a disease that people's eyes out.
Yeah, roughly, yeah.
And in order to grow the artificial eye, I believe that they had to be implanted in someone's head for a period of time. And basically people like the idea of the artificial eye, but they're not willing to sacrifice themselves to make that, take on that obligation.
Right. Yeah, so he compares it with, there's an example he gives elsewhere in the book where he says, actually self-ownership is really, really attractive, plausible as an idea because, consider an eye lottery, he says, right? Like suppose that you really care about equality. And we know that in our world, some people are born with two eyes that both function, and they can see through them. Most of us, fortunately, are like that. And then some people are born blind, they have zero eyes that can function. So that's very unequal, right? We have a benefit of sight that they lack. And so you might say, if we could fix some of the blindness with just giving people, it doesn't exactly work like that, but we can just take the eyes out of my socket and then put it in their sockets. They could see too, and I would have one eye, could get this tremendous benefit, right? Like they go from being absolutely blind to having one eye. Much, much better and much more equal. He says, so let's have a lottery, right? We'll just have many more people with 2 eyes and not as many people who are blind. And so we just have a lottery, and it's like the draft during the Vietnam War, right? Like on the basis of your social security number, it comes up like you get to serve in Vietnam at that point, or now in this example, something like your number comes up, you lose an eye, and it goes to this person. Cohen says, we don't want that rule. That's not I don't think too many people here will have the intuition like, yeah, that's justice served, right? Even though inequality is being reduced. And Nozick would of course say, yeah, of course that's not justice served, because nobody can help themselves to your body without first asking your permission, right? Like some people do it with their kidneys, right? They give up voluntarily a kidney to save another person. You only need 1 kidney to live, so we have 2. So you can give up 1 and save another person's life by just donating a kidney. People do that. But that's one thing. It's quite another for us to say, like, hey, I know you have 2, I need 1, I'm going to take it. Forcibly take it. And so Nozick would say, yeah, we can't do that because you're a self-owner. You own your body and all the organs in it, whether it's the eye or the kidney or whatever it might be. And Cohen says, yeah, I get that intuition, but it's not quite right to talk about that as ownership. And then he has this artificial lottery example, which is the one that Joe was describing. So it's like, suppose that now we have people who have eyes implanted later, and artificial eyes implanted. Artificially constructed, produced, medically produced, constructed eyes implanted in. And we want to redistribute those by taking them out of their sockets, so go back to 1 and then save people from blindness. Would that be okay? And he wants to say, well, if you believe the answer is no, it's still not okay, fine, but you cannot make the self-ownership argument. Because those artificial eyes, they weren't part of your natural self. You weren't born with them, they weren't part of you, they were added to you artificially. So if you think there's something wrong with that, thus taking that, then you have to give a different argument than self-ownership, because it wasn't part of the self that you originally owned. He thinks there's something wrong with it, but then he says, well, what's wrong with it? It's the autonomy, it's the interference with your life, it's the non-control, etc. This is a question I'm asking you a little more reflection. So the objection is that it makes some people into resources to be used by others, whether it's like eye donors, kidney donors, or labor donors, money donors. So if you think, just like stepping back, why is Cohen disagreeing with this? Andrew?
He believes that many people claim for resources.
Yeah, good. And so how does that why is that different from what Nozick is saying? People have equal claim to resources. That's true.
So, like, if I'm using something and someone else wants to use it, we have to figure out a way. We have equal claim to it rather than I got your first or anything like that, or it's mine.
Good. And then redistribution is not that big a deal anymore because you're just reinforcing that equal claim. Yeah, so like some type of initial equal claim to the world, maybe. And it's this privatization part that he doesn't like, right? The private property part, where individuals get to claim and hoard even large chunks of material wealth for themselves and not share with those people who might need it or want it. All right. Any questions about this? All right, we'll go on. This is where we stopped last time. If you remember right, this is the basic version of the self-ownership argument that Nozick wants to give that leads to a libertarian outcome, which is a no redistributive taxation outcome. Because when we have redistributive taxation, what we're doing is we're forcing people to help other people peace against their will. We're not asked whether we want to pay taxes, we're made to pay taxes, and those taxes go to fund other things that you haven't chosen, and that violates 5, and but 5 is true. It's true by virtue of 1 through 4. And And Cohen's criticism is the stuff about waivable and non-waivable obligations, etc., is supposed to demonstrate that's not true. Now it focuses on one particular move that Nozick makes. The move is, and this is sometimes people have complained about because it's really only appearing at one point in the entire book, but the move is, Nozick says, when we allow people to force us to help others, we are allowing them to claim ownership in us. It's like they possess us. And so it's a mini version of something akin to forced labor. Forced laborers are made to work. It's like they're under control. Like, say, like prisoners who are like I don't know if it still happens, but it used to be like with the pickaxes have to hit these boulders into little small pieces. It's forced labor, and they're literally under control of the state because they're prisoners in this case. And so the state controls them as the prisoner is as much a tool for the state as the pickaxe is a tool for the prisoner, which is the means to get things done. It's something that they have under control, like an ownership stake. And so maybe that's okay with prisoners because they're criminals, even when they're criminals. But, says Nozick, it's not okay to just do this with people at random, just generally. You can't just do it with me or you if we're innocent, just doing our stuff day to day. And so he says, when we make people help others against their will, we are treating them as if, in a mini version of it, but still akin, similar to this kind of proprietary control, this kind of ownership stake. Ours to use like you might use a mere tool that you own, a hammer, a pickaxe. And so that's wrong. And that's the one that Cohen jumps on. Right? Cohen says, no, when you force people to do things, even though they didn't agree to it, even if they're not criminals and so on, that doesn't always mean that you have an ownership stake in it. An example of this is sort of the formalized version of the argument, but the example he gives is what we talked about, is this example of like obligations to your sick mother or something. So you have an obligation to tend to your sick mother. That's not an obligation you contracted into, it's not something you voluntarily agreed to, but it is a real obligation. And if you refuse, right, and I were to force you to do so, say, you're going to do it or else scratch your car or whatever, do something like that, and that makes you actually do it, that's not me treating you as if you are a mere tool for me to be used one way or another. Because it's not up to me that you have that obligation. I didn't choose that yet. Use your pickaxe to destroy boulders or something. Or something else that I cook up. No, there's just this obligation to assist other people, your mother in this case. And when I make you do that, it's not me controlling you, it's me enforcing an obligation that was already there. And it's very different. So even though the obligation was not voluntarily incurred by you, and even though we were actually enforcing it on you, that's not us controlling you or owning you or having you sort of under our control subjectively. And that's the key difference. That doesn't mean you can just go around forcing people to do just anything. Of course not, says Cohen, because he doesn't believe in this autonomy stuff. But it's a counterexample. It's a counterexample to when Nozick says, whenever you force someone to help another person against their will, you are acting as if you're their owner. No, because think about when you force someone to help their sick mother. You're not acting as if you were their owner. No, that's question. So far, so good? That's the objection, right? So then, we'll move to the positive view that Cohen is himself, this autonomy view that Cohen is. We'll take it a little slower there. So what Cohen is trying to do is he's trying to replace self-ownership with this other value, autonomy. And so what he wants to do is he acknowledges that self-ownership is really attractive. That's the example of the eye lottery, right? It's like you can't just use people as bunches of organs running around to be harvested for the sake of equality. You got 2 kidneys, I need one. I'll go get one. Can't do that. That's a really attractive part of self-ownership. Self-ownership explains why you cannot do that. But there's also the unattractive part, thinks Cohen. The unattractive part is that this is the libertarian part, the anti-socialist part. People have just no obligations to assist anyone else, including their mothers, including a person who really just needs helping, like a person who's on the side of the road bleeding, needs to be driven to a hospital. You could drive him to the hospital. You don't do so. Did you do anything wrong? Everyone wants to say yes, but the libertarian has to say, if you did something wrong, it was in some special way, but it wasn't an obligation that you find. They didn't have a claim on you that you drive them to the hospital. Nobody can. Unless you give them your permission or you agree or you promise or something, but not just because they're dying. So what Cohen wants to do is he wants to keep the nice stuff, the no organ harvesting, the no slavery, the no assault, like all that stuff. And get rid of the unattractive part, which is no obligations to help the needy. He wants obligations to help the needy without the assault. You got to get rid of self-ownership if you want this, because self-ownership gets you the attractive, but it also gets you the unattractive parts. Right. So you reject self-ownership, and so he wants a different view that is this one that keeps the attractive and the unattractive part, and that's promoting autonomy. So he thinks what really matters ultimately is not that we treat every individual person as the owner of their self, but rather that we consider everyone as a person who has autonomy, and that our actions morally should be aimed at promoting that autonomy. And that means most of the time that you leave people alone, right? That you don't beat them up, you don't force them to do stuff, etc., etc. But he thinks at the same time, it's promoting. It's not just respecting autonomy when it exists. It's promoting. So if there are people around who don't have autonomy, who don't have enough money to be autonomous, who don't have enough opportunities to be autonomous, then you've got to do some redistribution to get those people autonomy as well. And so that's the goal. So you get then redistribution for the needy to get them autonomy, and every other time you get just all the self-ownership protections, and so on. All right. So he thinks, right, this is going to work out quite nicely. This is a really good idea that I've had here, because the libertarian program, he says, does not actually give you autonomy. Now, if you care about autonomy, then you cannot care about self-ownership, because self-ownership gets in the way of autonomy. So now you can see, right? Self-ownership has its attractive and its unattractive features. I go and have a better view. It has all the attractive stuff and none of the unattractive stuff. And if you see that my view is really good and has its attractive parts, actually the self-ownership view gets in the way of that attractive part. And so it's doubly bad. Not only does it have its own bad parts, it also gets in the way of the good parts of other things. So he has at least 3 points, right? First, what the libertarian wants, he wants a capitalist economy, but he says in good Marxist fashion, in the capitalist economy, the autonomy of the proletariat will be denied. So it'll be like the workers, the working classes, will not get autonomy. These people are ground down, stomped on by the market economy, by capitalists, exploitation, etc., etc. And so they end up being poor with no opportunities, little education, little independence, little autonomy. That's the idea. This, of course, is an empirical question. Cohen is just asserting it. He gives us no evidence. This is obviously true, but you might wonder whether it's obviously true. Most libertarians who deny it, they think it's not true that the capitalist economy makes the working class so much worse off. But that's up to you. We have to see if that's true or not. In principle, you should be able to measure this. Here's a little more meat on the bone. What Cohen says is autonomy is something we could measure in the following way. We'd say, well, in order to be autonomous, you have to have many options. Meaning many options about how to live, what to do, etc. And so that is going to mean having a lot of opportunities to think like education, but also welfare or maybe healthcare, things like that. Those things are all necessary to give people a lot of choices and options in life. And if you think those are necessary to give people options in life, and you think that a capitalist economy won't give that to people, then you have an argument for why that would be a bad thing. Again, it's a claim, right, that the libertarian type society won't give that to people. The libertarians usually won't agree. If you read Nozick says this stuff in the Lucky and Proviso parts, etc., where he thinks actually market societies provide many, many more opportunities to all people across the board than any other alternative. He takes quite the opposite view. But Cohen doesn't believe that. Cohen thinks, no, the poor are getting ground down, they don't have anything like this. And that's an objection. And the third is this Kantian idea, if you remember from last time. Nozick has an argument about rights as side constraints, like limits on how we can use people. And that's, he says, an expression of Kant's idea. Kant thinks that to respect other people as free and equal individuals, we have to respect them as putting limits on our goal-seeking behavior. We want to pursue our own ends. We want to use things as means to get our own ends. And that might include using other people as means to your own ends. And Kant says that's okay to use people as means for your ends, but only if you also treat them as ends in themselves. So you respect them as having their own goals and their own right to set their own goals, and you don't force them into your goals. So if your goals and their goals overlap in some way that you can cooperate and they're happy to help you get what you want, then that's fine. But if not, and you have to force them to serve your goals, then not fine. And so, Nozick says, well, if you believe that, then you have to believe in strong individual rights, and especially these libertarian rights where we say there's no forcing of people to do anything. Because as soon as you force people, you're imposing your goals on them. You don't let them choose their own goals. And so Cohen has these couple of pages where he goes through some fairly detailed Kantiana, like some Kant digging. He says that's not really what Kant means. What Kant means, Cohen says, it's not this sort of respecting people as individual end centers, but rather he means it's like a kind of an attitude you take towards people. You take an attitude of respect towards them or not. A lot is gonna, whether you think that Cohen is right or wrong about this, by the way, he's gonna turn on a couple of things. He's gonna turn on whether you think these are forceful claims, whether he's empirically right, whether you care about this Kant stuff, and whether he's right about that. But also whether someone like Nozick is right when he would say, sure, you might try to redistribute my money, or my eyes for that matter, to promote autonomy, but that's still a use of me, a free individual, for the purposes that I haven't chosen myself. And that's going to be constantly the objection. So you're going to have to do some weighing, right, where you think, well, anyone who believes that you can be forced to serve a certain purpose is going to have to accept that that purpose might be a really valuable one, including the autonomy of other people. But it wasn't about how valuable it was about the forcing part. Just to respect people as individual rights holders just means you don't force them. Even though what you want to go and do with this forcing is really important, sure. So at that point, that point itself won't impress Nozick very much. He says, yeah, sure, autonomy is really important, I agree, but it wasn't about how important it was about respecting individual rights. It wasn't about that these rights would get in the way of goals. That was the whole point. That's why they're side constraints. They're supposed to get in the way of goals. Otherwise, they're not worth anything. They don't protect you. So that's one side of the view, or the debate. The other side is with Cohen saying, well, but then you have a theory that says we should respect everybody as a free and equal individual, except some people might end up with nothing at all, and other people might end up with very comfortable lives. And then I'm supposed to say that to respect people equally, I have to let the person at the bottom suffer and the person at the top be luxurious. And that's a bizarre thing to say. to the extent that you're more attracted by that, you're going to have to allow some type of goal thinking enter into your theory. Right? You can't think of rights as side constraints the way that Nozick wants. And that's exactly what Cohen is doing. Right? Cohen is talking about promoting autonomy. That's a goal. You want to get more overall of that stuff. Not at any cost, but at some point, at some cost. Right? Any questions on this? Oh, yeah, Jordan.
Sorry, I still don't understand why they just said, like, when I think that you take like Nozick's view of self-ownership, that apparently means like there's no obligations to bestow assistance to other people. Why is it that you take mine and throws it away?
Yeah. So it's going to be no involuntary obligations to the system. So you can promise me to help me clean up my attic this weekend. So then you create an obligation for yourself by promising to help me, to assist me in my attic cleaning. That's fine, I think it's nothing. But it's different when you didn't agree to it. If I just come and I say, Vernon, you're going to help me clean my attic, or else. And that type of forcing that I'm doing that is Nozick thinks now I'm treating you as if you're something that's just under my control, something that I can use just like I would use my lawnmower. I tell like tomorrow I'm going to use your lawnmower. The lawnmower doesn't have a say in that. It's okay because that's actually a tool, right? But you're not just a tool, right? So if I treat you the same way I treat the lawnmower, I'm not treating you the way you have a right to be treated.
No, I actually took obligation to mean something like a moral obligation, like if you don't do this, it's wrong, you're in the wrong.
Yeah.
That's not quite the same thing as like promises and enforcing. Because this is sort of like just, I didn't see like the moral right or wrong aspect to it. It was more like just something said we were going to do something and I felt accountable. Or like there's a requirement in some country that something happens. It seems to be decided, that's decided in the point of whether or not the reaction is right.
Well, maybe, I'm not entirely sure. You know, Nozick wants to say you don't have an obligation to help the needy in society. So the government says I'm going to take 20% of your income or whatever. Yeah. Because there's needy people I need to feed and educate and etc. Then Nozick wants to say no, but you don't get to do that. Because if you tell me I have this obligation, you're effectively making me 20% into tool. Something you get to control and redirect from the way I would like to use it to the way you would like to use it. And I would like to use it on this, that, or the other thing, and you would like to use it on helping the needy. And that's maybe valuable, maybe not, but it's not up to you to decide. So if you tell me I have this obligation to spend 20% of my time serving the needy, you're telling me that 20% of my time is not up to me. So that is obligation we're talking about.
That's sort of I just made it separate to like what was meant by obligation in this case. Usually I think that obligation is something separate.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else? So, on to the artificial eye lottery. We talked a little bit about this now, but I'll just spell out the argument a little more carefully, in more detail. So Cohen thinks this artificial eye lottery example tells you, demonstrates, makes it really clear why self-ownership is not the thing that matters, but autonomy is. And so here's basically, we talked a little bit ago about how the example is set up, and here's how it goes, the argument. This is first, an artificial implanted eyes, which Joe was talking about earlier, cannot be part of your natural self, because you were born without them and they're artificially added to you. Now, if something is not part of your artificial, this is not what Cohen says, but this is implicit in the argument. Something is not, you weren't born with it, it's not part of your natural self, then it cannot be protected by your rights of self-ownership. Presumably, your rights of self-ownership protect your natural body, not the externally acquired things like your private property or your land or your car or something. self. The self is your physical body in your world. So then it follows, right, that your self-ownership cannot protect the artificial eyes. Now, obviously, this is also not stated, but still, obviously, if something is wrong, it cannot be wrong because it violates a right that doesn't exist, and it has to violate an actual right for it to be wrong. So if there are no rights to self-ownership over these eyes, then if it's wrong to transfer the eyes, it cannot be wrong because of self-ownership, because self-ownership doesn't protect those rights. So that shows you, right? Like if you think artificial eye snatching is also wrong, then you don't believe in self-ownership, you believe in something else. And so here's a suggestion. He says the wrongness, the real wrongness of the artificial eye snatching is actually the same as the wrongness of the natural eye snatching. It's wrong the same, all the same, both cases. Namely, autonomy. But only one of these cases is self-ownership protected, the other one is not. So self-ownership would have to say, actually the natural eye lottery would be wrong, but the artificial eye lottery, fine. And that's nonsensical things. Cones, so don't believe in self-ownership. Okay. There's a couple of questions here I'll ask you. This is the last thing actually I'll do, but just to think about, take a step back and think about this. Cohen says the artificial eyes are not covered by self-ownership. Do you believe in that? Is that the right thing to say? Andrew?
Well, you could point out, like, technically, none, you could say none of our body it would be, like, running along in what's natural, because if you eat food, you use that for energy, part of your body.
Right.
You've got that from somewhere else. Like, you weren't born a full-grown man, so you obviously got external things to what your body is.
Right, good. So you're thinking like there's all sorts of things that over time get added to your natural body, the one that you're born with.
Yeah.
And so if it's okay for if your hair grows out to say your hair is part of your body, then maybe something else that we add to your body is maybe just as much part of your body too. Am I getting what you're saying?
Sort of. I'm more going to like into like what is natural, like it's an arbitrary thing.
Ah, okay, good. Yeah. Right. So, yeah, I think the spirit of what you're saying and what I'm saying is the same. Then, right? Like there is no clear distinction between the things that over time change about our bodies and these artificial eyes. Now, it's going to be a little tricky, right? Because we'll have to have some explanation about, presumably, if you put a hat on your head, right? That's not connected to your body in the same way that your actual hair is connected to your body. For one, you can take it off, but also it's just a slightly different relationship. I mean, you can take your hair off too. You just cut it, right? Now, is it growing out of your body? Right? Is that natural? Well, maybe, but then the artificial eyes are no longer covered. Right? So it's going to have to, there's some type of tricky theory that shows us why not everything we put in contact with our body is natural, part of ourselves. But the artificial eyes are. Do you have any ideas about that?
I was thinking, like, the example, like, what if someone was born with, like, a sci-fi type genetic disorder, like, that if they went into a room with people, like, they burst into flames or something like that. And, like, and they somehow, like, knew how to get rid of it. Does that person have control of whether or not they can get rid of that genetic disorder?
Okay. I'm not quite understanding can you explain the connection with this?
Like, if you were, like, let's say, like, in some sci-fi kind of weird field, you have, like, a genetic disorder, like, you produce something that kills the people around you.
Right.
And they discovered a way to get rid of, like, to splice that out of you. Like,
Because it's covered up by, it's part of yourself, you mean? Right. I guess on Nozick's view, the answer would have to be yes, but you have to accept that you can't also like then go into rooms where other people are, right? Because once you get into contact with others who are getting killed by whatever it is that you're exuding, you're thereby, like, that's like attacking them, right? You're violating their self-ownership, you're killing them. So if you just want to be sitting by yourself all the time and not ever come into contact with anyone else, I guess you're free to do that, and then we can't force you to change. But if you do want to come into rooms where other people are, who otherwise their rights would be violated by you, then it would be, you'd have a choice to make. Is that, am I getting onto it? Right, well, the more general point here anyway is, what Cohen thinks is like intuitively you're going to think, yeah, the natural eyes and the artificial eyes are the same, like they're similarly connected to me and my rights. Cohen wants to say, yeah, of course, but the self-ownership theory cannot explain this. So we need a different theory to explain this. And that's the autonomy theory. If we can make a move sort of like what Andrew was suggesting, that maybe there is a broader sense of natural, or maybe a different understanding that can explain this, that also covers the artificial eyes, then you have a way out. Maybe a way to avoid what Cohen is saying. Well, it's as natural as anything else, or it's as connected to my body as anything else. And so, self-ownership covers these rights too, and then the objection fails. Talked a little bit about this already. This is probably the most important point here, right? So, these examples about artificial eyes and stuff are a little silly in ways. Somewhat irritating maybe. They don't really get at what matters, right? Like what Nozick is getting animated about. What Nozick is getting animated about is that he thinks that redistribution, a theory that wants redistribution, is a theory that tells us that people just have to constantly serve the goals of others, or the lives of others. And it doesn't take us seriously enough that we are separate individuals, each with their own life. That's ultimately what he cares about. And he doesn't care about artificial eyes or natural eyes, what the difference might or might not be. So if we step back, we have to wonder, like, what Cohen is saying, his objection is, well, positive duties towards other people or obligations to other people is not always an assault, right? It's not always a way you're being subjected or made to serve the goals of others, or made subservient to people around you. Because those others don't have control over those obligations are just a part of justice. Well, when we originally in the beginning talked about autonomy, we said autonomy has these two parts, right? One is the control by others, the other is you controlling yourself. And so Cohen points out, well, you have these obligations to others, doesn't mean that others control you. We still have the question in, well, does it give you enough control over yourself? At some point, these obligations are going to become so onerous, so pressing, right, that maybe there's not much control over yourself anymore. So maybe 20% tax, you're not getting too worried, you think it's only 20% of your money that serves other people. You still have 80% where you have control over what would happen. Of course, we can ramp it up, right? Like 50, 60, 70, 80, now 100% tax rate, at some point, you have no control left anymore. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's another sort of question I had. I mean, why is it that with there being obligations, just because they kind of aren't just created by just whatever someone wishes for you to do. They're things that are kind of separate. They're already established sort of things. Why is it that like enforcement of obligation can't also be like a restriction on people's autonomy? It sounds like
Right.
it seems like
right.
sort of them, but
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah, that's kind of the point I'm trying to make here too. Right? So that you might think that it still violates autonomy not because it gives other people control over you, but because it takes away your control over you. Even if other people are not bossing you around, where they decide what you do and what you don't do. Maybe that's written in the stars or something.
well, I mean,
but it's not. It still leaves open that you don't still live your own life. So.
It's okay. I still sort of saw it as people bossing me around now. Not because they're setting the rule for what you have to do, but because they are deciding whether or not you're going to follow it, right? And then I don't understand that. It still sort of seems like being forced
Sure.
to do something.
Right. Yeah, Cohen would probably have said something like this. There are two different questions. Like one is the question of what really are your obligations, and those obligations might include other people, like helping others. And then there's a further question of like who's going to be in charge of actually administering that, making sure that it happens, that you do your obligations. And that is going to be actual persons. But ideally, those persons wouldn't just be imposing their ideas on you. They would just do the right thing and just make you actually comply or exercise your obligations as they already existed. It wasn't up to them. They just administer them. Of course, it doesn't always work that way. We don't live in that perfect world, but that's at least the ideal. And so sometimes you have to deal with some imperfections in our world. But that's just how it is. That, I think, is how he would reply. But he's going to say, like, it's not, you're going to be forced to help other people, not because these others, these administrators thought so, right? But because you actually have to. Yeah?
So this argument is only on or against non-waivable obligation, and outside of that, because
Against what kind of obligation?
non-waivable.
So the non-waivable part is supposed to show Cohen thinks that you're not under the control of others. Because if it was waivable, then it meant that the other person could decide whether or not, yes or no, you have to do it. But if it's non-waivable, that means they don't have any control over whether or not you have to do it. You just have to do it. Not because they said so.
But it's still kind of argument, though, isn't it? If they're going to enforce you to do some obligation, it's for you, depending on whatever the punishment is or whatever that, I guess that punishment or judgment against not doing whatever, if there is one, isn't it still?
Is that because they might choose not to punish you? Or just because you're forced to do so?
Because you're forced to do it.
Right. Yeah. So I think that's right. And that's the part that Cohen never really gets to. And he can't really get to it because he wants you to be forced to do stuff. Right? That's the point. But the reason I was saying earlier, like this stuff about artificial eyes and natural eyes, is a little bit of a sideshow because ultimately that's not what Nozick is really worrying about. What he's worrying about is that you don't get to control your own life. And you can say that the obligation is non-waivable, and so the other person isn't deciding whether or not you have the obligation, yes or no. But that doesn't really help you when you're thinking at the end of the day, like how much of my time did I control? It's still the same, but it's only a part of it, not all of it. Cohen will probably answer the following to you. He'd probably say, well, wait a minute, do you think that other people have rights not to be killed? So, well, probably yes. Well, so that means there was a part of your day that you didn't control either, right? Which is the part, the people killing part. You could have chosen today to go on a murder spree, but you didn't because other people have a right that you don't. So your freedom to control your own life was limited already by that. So if we accept that there are limits to what you can do, then we have to wonder, like, well, how far do these limits go? And Cohen wants to say, well, there's no real reason to say it's only non-killing, non-beating up, non-stealing, and not also help others. These are all parts of your day that you don't fully control. Of course, Nozick doesn't think that's the same thing, but that's exactly the way we look at it. Sometimes people say there's a difference between positive and negative rights or obligations, where the negative rights or obligations are things like don't steal, don't kill, don't choose things you can avoid doing by not doing anything at all. And then the positive rights and positive obligations are different because they require you to actively do things. not clear whether that distinction really holds, because in some sense, not killing requires you to actively do things too. Namely, actively do one of the many options that involves not killing people, right? Whatever it is, but that's an action you're going to have to perform. It could be just sitting here, but you're still doing stuff. You might like it better, but it's not a fundamental difference. And the fact I don't like it is usually not a good theory of justice.
I don't like not killing.
Yeah, exactly. I don't like not killing. It's not a good argument for why people don't have a right not to get killed. So Cohen would say, well, I don't like having to help other people. It's not a good objection to having to help other people. Alright, here's the last bit. So Cohen thinks that we should promote or maximize maybe even autonomy. We've talked about this already too, but that takes a different approach to what it is to respect people. Cohen says to respect people is we have to treat them as right holders, side constraints, so people who put limits or barriers to the goals that we want to pursue. And Cohen thinks we should promote autonomy, so that's thinking of the rights over yourself, not just as restraints, side constraints, but as goals, things to be promoted or maximized. Finally, Cohen talks about how markets, the kind of thing that libertarians want, restrict people's autonomy, limit their available options. Because in the market, to get a certain opportunity, you have to be able to pay for it. In the market, things are distributed largely towards those people who, in terms of their ability to pay, not in terms of their ability, not in terms of their need. Here's a possible answer that someone like Nozick might give as well. But if you want to have your socialist view, Cohen, then you're telling me I can't make any money through my own labor either. Right? And this is supposed to promote my autonomy, but it's not clear how this exactly promotes my autonomy. So here's an example, right? Like say that you have a right to control and use your mind as an autonomous person, and your body. Well, it seems then that you also have a right to use your mind and body on the condition that somebody else do something, right? So I have the example here of like, I have the right to say, I will sing the happy birthday song, but only if everybody else sings along. I'm not going to sing by myself. But if we all sing together, then I'll do it. There's nothing wrong with saying that. It seems maybe I'm shy or whatever. I won't be doing my crappy singing. But if that's okay, I can do things on the condition that others do it as well. You can wonder, well, don't I also have a right to do things on the condition that they do something which involves benefiting me? Do something for me that I value. So sing the happy birthday song, or I'll help you clear out your attic if you help me clear out mine. It's a benefit to me. Of course, if that's okay, then if that's a kind of benefit or remuneration, that's okay, then why is not just straight up paying you also okay? And when you tell people you care about autonomy, but they cannot do this, that's puzzling. That's what the libertarian always would say. I agree with it, but autonomously I decide that I want to do things on the condition that other people want to pay me for it. On the condition that other people want me to do it so much that they're willing to give me something they value in exchange. How is that autonomy? Anyway, those are a couple of things to think about how exactly to sort out self-ownership versus autonomy problem. All right, does anyone have any question on this or closing thoughts? All right, well then, look at me finishing early, right at the end of the term. Final thing. Tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. your exam will come available on Canvas. So you can just go on Canvas, log in, and it'll be a thing in the sidebar that says quizzes. Click on there, and you'll find it. You open the quiz, and then the timer starts running. You have 75 minutes like you normally have in class. The thing closes on Saturday. Saturday. Note that that means, right, I think I've said this already, but I want to emphasize it. It means that the thing will be there available for you to take at any point in that time period. But once you open it, the timer starts running, and you click on that thing open once, right? Because once you click it on it, you have 75 minutes, and after that, it's done. So you can do that at any point during these 2 days, because don't sort of think, I'll look at it on Friday morning, and I'll actually take it on Saturday afternoon, because that's not happening.
What day is the paper due?
That's on the syllabus. It's the official exam date for the fourth. The fourth? Oh, it's going to be Thursday.
So is that submission online? Or
The paper?
yeah.
You can either email it to me, or you can come by to my office.
And also the essay for the test. Is that going to be in?
Oh, the exam essay, yeah, there will be an actual, like a little box in the exam that you can just type in.